that you bring a half Baptist, half Catholic, and a general that's about that liable to say a curse word at any moment into a Pentecostal pulpit. That's reaching. What perspective were you blessed by these gentlemen? I think it'd be just for a minute or two. And is there a brave soul in here that just would ask a question to Ken? And I know that this is tough, but is there someone that has a question that you'd just raise your hand and I know, yes, sir. Why don't you stand where they can hear you?
Um, so a couple things jump to mind. Acts 2, you have the Acts 2 church that sold everything and divided it as there was need, right? There was, however we want to cut that, there was this, what's mine is yours if you need it. Um, and I think as a church, number one, we always have to make sure that we embody that we're not attached to something. That's part of the reason I got out of being a financial planner. Was there was part of me that was really afraid of the moment where I'd help somebody accumulate $1 million, and then at the same time I hear about somebody who needs $1 million kidney transplant. I mean, just this moment where, great, you have, um, and you have to come up with some elaborate thing to hold on to what you have when there's such obvious need. Classism, I think, is again, it comes back to narrative. So much of our classism, whether it's first generation or inherited, right? Look at how I pulled myself up and what I've made myself into creates classism, right? I'm planting my flag in what I've become, which says that I reject what I was, and a lot of that often has to do with financial. So even though it's a beautiful story, where I am now is the opposite of where you were as the person walking in the door, and I chose to not be you. I mean, so we got to be careful that our transformative messages don't carry within them classism to begin with. Um, then on top of it, I think we use that classism to insulate ourselves, right? That somewhere in there, one of the jokes about growing up half Catholic, half Southern Baptist, is you kind of got both sides of the fence of people telling you who's in and who's not when it comes to the kingdom, right? And one of the easiest ways to figure out, well, we used to kind of joke about my mom, I adore her, but we used to say that our whole family's getting into heaven, and whoever else my mom decides to let in. But it's the same kind of classism, right? That somewhere in there, the easiest way to know who you are is by deciding that you're not one of them. And again, I think that classism is there, and I wrestle with it, whether it's do we send our kids to cotillion or what car do we drive? All those things, and that's just at the economic level. That's before we start splitting gender and race and all that kind of stuff. All those things, even if I don't wave it in your face, it still makes it different. In this day and age, one of the things that hurts kids more than anything else is Instagram. And I love looking at my sister's kids on Instagram and all this stuff, but you remember Christmas morning, right? You usually didn't figure out what the other kids got until school started 2 weeks later, right? You might figure out what the kids got on your street, but kids are live tweeting the fact that they're having this great Christmas morning, and some other kid's going, I got socks, and that's all our family can afford. So there's these very subtle things we do that I think promote that classism. And then maybe the worst part is we do it with a smile on our face. We do it completely oblivious, which then creates even more distance with those people of them going, again, feeling alone, right? Alone is this core thing that God attempts to rectify. That man, I walk in here, everybody seems to have it dialed in, everybody's got nice cars. There's no way these people are going to understand me, right? So I think ultimately my answer is prayerful, daily prayerful. That every day the question should be, God, what do you want me to do? Who do you want me to be? All this stuff, right? That if we have a standard operating procedure that we use that we don't need to ask God every day, show me who to be with the people that I run into, then I think we're lost. So that's where it's got to start, I think. But it's huge and it's hard and it's even thicker in the South, So did that help? So
I have two questions, and I want Crystal, for example. Okay, nobody cares anymore about ministry than Crystal. Nobody cares any more about ministry than Kayla. Nobody cares more about ministry than Marty. Nobody cares more about ministry than me. But me and Marty and Crystal and Kayla can fight like crazy over who's right. Because we're all thin-skinned when it comes to ministry. We build our own camps. This is my team, and that's your team. And so my question is, how do we, because we lead together but we lead apart, how do we protect ourselves from each other's emotions without? I walked in here, and Crystal was so mad at me she could kill me. I've had Kayla so mad she didn't speak to me for 2 weeks, but we're on the same team. And they have a right to be wrong the way I see things. So my question is these are precious people, and we're going to disagree. Give us some rules for fighting, some rules for disagreement, some rules for not understanding one another's, because we all have the same mission.
So here's the place that I'd start. This is one of the ones that gets me thrown out of some churches, but there's a great hidden gospel, right? I'm being tongue-in-cheek here, but if God simply saved us because he's a man of his word and can't contradict this covenant that he made, I think that's a pretty limited God. The reality is God delights in us. He enjoys us. We've come up with this kind of the guiding principle of our practice. To be loved without being liked means you're being tolerated. And that's what we call the gospel of like. To be loved without somebody showing demonstrated enjoyment of you means you're being put up with. And for most of us, we'd rather run away from that than be the thing that people put up with. And so when it comes to thicker skins, we're going to step on each other's toes and all that. Do you sense that, you know what, forget it, burn it all to the ground, I just want to hang out with you either way, right? That my world's a better place because you walked in the door today, forget it all, God will build another church, whatever, right? That at its core, if I know that you enjoy me, that you crave me, then all that stuff, classism and stuff, it begins to crumble. And same thing with thick skins in churches and all that kind of stuff. That we can butt heads or whatever, but you know what? Let's pack it in. Let's go eat lunch. I just really like you. I just want to spend time with you, right? And the greatest demonstration of like is allocated time, right? Do I choose to spend my time with you? Do I seek you out and lavish the one thing I cannot create more of in this life, right? And that's how we do that. You see it, right? I'm going a little bit beyond what we call the hermeneutical horizon here, but God comes to walk with Adam and Eve in the garden, right? Why? I think because he enjoys them. I think he gave them each other because he loves them. I think he's there. It says God comes to walk in the cool of the evening. You know what the cool of the evening is? It's the best part of the day. If there's ever a time you want to be laying in the grass with your kids, looking up at the clouds going over, it's there. He came just to dig on his kids, just to enjoy being with them, right? And again, as all of us as kids and all of us as parents and friends and all that, that speaks deeply to us. That as a kid, watch your kids. What they really want more than anything else is just to know that you enjoy them. That a lot of us grew up hearing, I can barely put up with what you're doing right now. I'm sick of you and your behavior, but you know, I'm your parent. I'll love you no matter what. That's not the message we want to hear. It's a great fallback. It's a great consolation prize. But the parent that looks and says, gosh, I'm ready to be done punishing you because I want to watch a movie with you because it's just the greatest of my life to watch a movie with my kid, right? That's what we crave, is that demonstrated that demonstrated enjoyment. So to answer your question, if you guys are people who clear space in your head to like each other, which means decluttering our schedules, our worries, our hurts, fears, and needs, and just freeing us up to be present in the present moment, then there's a lot more room to just sit back, kick back, and enjoy each other, soak each other in, become connoisseurs of each other who appreciate the differences between you, and enjoy it all. So,
the question I have, and those of you that have questions, Marty, you got a question for Kendall in a minute. Kendall, from leadership, there's different levels of leadership. If you're a sergeant and I'm the private, then I do what I'm told to do because you're my sergeant. I have to, or I get in trouble. So that's the lowest level of leadership, is to do what you're told. This guy's your boss, so if he says mop the floor, mop the floor. But as leaders in churches, pastors, teachers, leaders in churches, we lead by permission, and that's a different level. People come to church because they choose you. They can go to any church they want to. They passed a dozen to get here. They choose you to be a leader in their life. And you've experienced that from the bottom up. And so how do we as leaders, I talked to men that served. We were at our 30-year class reunion, and there were men that I never met before standing outside because they heard General Penn was in town. They told me at the front door, I'd die for him. I'd go in battle with him today. So how do you inspire that without cursing? So it comes.
In the Army, Buddy is right. I mean, by the Army doctrine, we have recognized three levels of leadership. You've got your direct leadership, which is where the sergeants and the lieutenants are down there saying, go here, do this, shoot that person. You've got your organizational level of leadership, which in numbers terms, you're talking about leadership over about between 130 to about 500 soldiers. And you rely more on, your subordinate leading through leaders to get out there. You provide a good intent. You provide kind of what you want the end state to look like, and then you trust them to go out there and do what needs to be done. And you don't get so much concerned about how they do it. You just worry that they bring you back the right product that you're looking for. And then at the very highest levels, you've got the strategic level of leadership, and that's the hardest because there is no, you know, direct oversight. There's nobody looking over your shoulder saying, yes, you're right, no, you're wrong. And so the way the Army addresses it is through education and through study. And so, as a reference point, I spent 32 years in the Army, and if you go back and add up all of the time that I spent in a schoolhouse environment studying the craft of the organization, I spent over 3 years in schools learning my job. How that translates into to a church, I think it's probably it's certainly getting into the Bible and knowing everything that God wants you to do, everything that He wants you to be to say to the people that show up here. But it's also having a good sense of what's going on around you and staying involved with your various the assistant ministers of all of the various ministries that you have here in church, because they've got some insight as to what's going on, what's working well, and what things are kind of tripping you up a little bit. So I don't know if that gets after your answer or not.
Testing. Can you hear me okay now? I just wanted to kind of piggyback actually on the question that he just raised, and that is, and I understand that there's direct order type of leadership where you tell somebody to do something and they do it, and so forth. But as you mentioned in the beginning, the definition of leadership at its core is influence and knowing how to project it in the right way. And I've always been taught that leadership is influence, and you can the moment you begin to intimidate somebody is the moment you cease to influence them, is what I've always been taught. But at the same time, I know it's not always that way in the military. But I think that there's got to be a point or a level where somebody that's maybe a general or somebody up there, that there is a level of confidence and respect, that not just because they said this is our order to do this, but because that person in leadership says this is what we need to do, that these people have so much confidence and so much respect and trust in that leader that they would run through a wall for them. Does that make sense? And go through the battlefield no matter what, because we trust you.
It absolutely does. There's if you read through all of the literature that's out there over what is a leader, there, like I mentioned earlier, you get lots of definitions. So the Army never could quite come up with a quick, short, one sentence word, and so they came up with a model of leadership, a model of a leader, and they recognized that there are certain things that a leader is inherently in his or her person. There are certain things that a leader knows through study and through application and through experience, and then there are certain things that a leader does in terms of how he or she gets out and manages and leads the organization that he's responsible for. And so what you're talking about there is really in that be, know, do model is part of the B. It's the character, it's the values that leader brings to the fore. And so, obviously treating soldiers with respect, or any, whether it's a soldier or whether it's a church member, with respect, showing honor and loyalty to the organization, a sense of selfless service, so that people see that you're not doing it for your own personal gain. All of those things influence how people look at you, and it influences how they react to you. Absolutely, and it's we call it leadership as a contact sport, as a quick little saying that we throw out in the Army. It's getting out there and being involved with everybody that works for you and everybody you work for, and letting them see that you have their interest at heart, regardless of what the mission or how dangerous things are.
circles back to your question about classism, right? No, stay up here. You're awesome too. I'm sure they got more for you. I do. We joke. The number one thing I hear out of men, and you see a lot of books about this with marriage, the number one thing men want is respect, and I call baloney on that. Here's why. You can respect somebody while you also internally push away from them, right? I respect cops because they can write me a ticket and make my life scary, but I may not like them. Respect is a backup prize to admiration. Why would men follow this guy into battle? It's because of admiration. When you admire somebody, respect is automatic, right? Respect is a byproduct of admiration. So here's where this all works, right? Who are the most admirable guys? And when you talk, right, he comes across to me as so humble and accessible. Like there's a party that's going, this guy's a general, he's so nice. Like aren't generals supposed to be mean and yell, that there's this, it can be mean, cuss words. That when we admire somebody, it's this really weird thing, right? When we admire them, we put them in a class above themselves. What makes them most admirable is they say, don't do that. You and I are the same guy. Just somebody was dumb enough to give me this role, but you and I are no different. Even in your admiration of me, please do not separate me from yourself and put me above you. And it comes back to Colossians or whatever, right? That Christ did not consider equality with God something to be grasped or held on to, but lowered himself, right? He says, no, I'm one of you. John 1:14, Jesus puts skin on and moves into the neighborhood, right? That those are the most admirable leaders, or the guys that you're like, man, I could sit and have a beer with this guy. Like, this guy seems just like one of the rest of us, right? And then you all of a sudden trust that guy, because he's one of us, would never do anything that would harm us. And so I'm following this guy wherever he goes because he's one of us. He won't even allow us to make him better than us. Does that make sense?
I totally agree with what you just said. I just feel like, with leadership, comes respect. And that's respecting others. It's no big eyes, little U's. And as leaders, you have to be very careful with influence. When you're admired, of course, you have great influence. And I've seen where that influence is taken, people take advantage of it, where then manipulation comes for their own personal gain. As leaders, you have to stay on a level, whereas be careful how you use that influence. I guess I say that because you can make or break a person. A great leader develops great leaders. And in saying that, I just know, just in being a leader myself and dealing with leaders, we have to come to a place of humility where if we do something wrong, we have to be an example and apologize. A lot of times pride sets up when there's classism or whatever, I'm up here, you're down here. Even though sometimes we don't always try to, we don't want to come across that way, we have to be very careful to turn the mirror on ourselves and really evaluate what we do as leaders. Because this came from teaching long time ago, all through life. You treat people the way you want to be treated. And if you constantly think about that as a leader, you're going to watch what you say, how you say it, what you do, how you do it, and make sure you walk by example. So can you give us leaders just some insight on that as a whole, with that?
The way I would answer that question is the garment. You had the Lord that thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but he made himself of no reputation and took upon him the form of a man and became obedient to death, even the death of the cross. That you look, what is, a king walks in, a preacher walks in, he's got a $3,000 suit, and $1,000 pair of shoes, and the license plate says Tithe One on it. It's Cadillac. Actually preached in a church, and a pastor's car, his license plate says Tithe One. His wife was Tithe Two. And so but what's the real garment of a leader? In Jewish culture, the servants had clothes that they wore, and you could tell. You can go into a restaurant, and the guy in the white shirt is waiting on you. The guy in the blue shirt, he's waiting on the waiter. Okay. And in the Jewish household, they wore, the different servants in the household wore different clothes. And the lowest servant, you may know what the lowest form of a servant wore? The one that washed the feet of the people that came in, he wore a towel. What was the last garment recorded Jesus wore? He wore a towel. What did he do? He washed the feet. And they would have, and it inspired people to follow him. And so you serve the people that you minister to in your small group or in your Sunday school class or in your praise team or anybody that you're dealing with, your neighbors, but wearing a towel. That's the way I would answer that question. And I think for Kendall, and he won't be personal, but I've heard men say that he would do things that a general officer wouldn't do to inspire, and those men followed him. They stood outside at our class reunion to wait to talk to him because they heard he was in town. It's when he was living in Indiana, and just to talk to him because they fought in battle with him. So that inspired me. Would you answer that question a little bit more professionally, perhaps?
I don't know about professionally, but it comes back to hurt, fear, and need. The greatest way to remain humble is keep it at to be able to take inventory of the hurt, fear, and need that I've caused in other people. To see me as part of the problem that God's solving in other people's lives, and that way I never get ahead of myself. So I think that's a big deal. I'm a big movie guy. I don't know if you guys are movie folks, but Gladiator, great movie, right? Old movie. There's a scene at the beginning of that movie where the young Caesar, Joaquin Phoenix's character, gets brought into the tent, and he's told that he's not going to be, Caesar king when his dad dies, and he starts crying. And it's a great line, especially for us as parents and fathers. But he says to him, "Your failings as a son are my failings as a father." Right? That there's this wrapping this arms around. I damage people. I'm a good therapist who still damages people. I still damage my kids and wife. You don't have to scroll but 2 or 3 text messages through to find the last, fight with my wife where I probably stuck my foot in my mouth. I mean, I'm a walking wrecking ball, and if I can keep that at the center, then that goes a long way towards me leading humbly. I think guys like this that they don't sit up and I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I love business stuff. You've seen this huge shift in Silicon Valley with like Google and all these companies where when you walk in, you can't tell who the CEO is. There's big pharma cubicles and the CEO's in there somewhere. If anything, he's got the small one, but he puts himself last, servant leadership, all that kind of stuff. So, but remember your wrecking balls. Yes, sir.
That puts pressure on me. You said the word accessible, right, or accessibility, and I just wrote down a motto. It says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, type of deal. And as a coach and as a teacher, I have an open door policy, right? That's what we say, right? You can come see me anytime if you have any questions, anything, that you can come sit down. And when you say questions, really what you mean is if you question my leadership, my authority, right, how I'm doing things. And that's what they'll do. They'll come question it. But I also say, be prepared for the answer, right? So how can we as leaders communicate an open door, mean it honestly, right? Like at one time I had a suggestion box, right? Evaluation, different things like that. And then when you get suggestions, you can't be offended by those suggestions because they're coming from the people who you lead, And so they're giving you what you need, yeah. So we can say it, but what are your best practices for allowing the lower, quote unquote, lower levels, the ones that are following? Because I don't think you can be a very good leader until you've been a follower, type of deal. What are your best practices?
So make sure I hand it off to him, because I really want to know how it works in a place where people perhaps aren't supposed to even feed it up the food chain. You're not maybe supposed to question. Again, it comes back, classism, such a great word. It comes back to emotional equality. Emotional equality is so different than equality of decision making, right? That I retain the right to make the decision as a parent or as the business owner or whatever. I do a lot of couples work, and couples, but men in particular, are phenomenally bad at separating validating somebody's from experience with agreeing with what they're saying. When you're my wife or my kid, if you come to me hurt, afraid, or in need, that's all I need to know. I don't care if you're right. I don't care if you're wrong. The analogy we use is whether I ran over your foot with my car because you were standing too close or I was driving carelessly, we still need to get you to the hospital, right? That to look at somebody and say, it breaks my heart that this hurts you, and to let it break your heart is so different from whether or not I can give you your way on what you want. Now, if I let it break my heart, it's amazing what other solutions we come up with. People, you really at the heart of that, people don't care what you know till they know what you care. That's what it is right down to the person who changes out the trash in our offices. If they ever feel minimized or we pulled class on them or anything, we grind to a halt, because I need you to know that it grieves me deeply that you would feel those things. My children, I got 11 and 14-year-old and a 27-year-old, but the 11 and 14-year-old, if they come to me and say, you work too much, I can give them all the answers on why that's necessary, some of which are going to be convenient answers that I want to believe, right? But the bottom line is, you're allowed to be my emotional equal, which means that opinion is 100% valid. If it sucks to be my kid, it sucks to be my kid sometimes. I'm not going to take it away from you with an explanation, right? If I do that, if I take it away with an explanation, then it's intellectual classism, right? Oh, thanks for your cute little complaint here, but let me tell you why you're wrong, right? And a lot of the other things that we do from a class point of view, that's where it starts, is with intellectual classism, that I explain away your right to feel because I don't like what you're saying. So I want to hear from you on feedback from people who may not be supposed to give it.
Well, if you've served, all branches of the military have an open door policy, and in general, the way it's supposed to work is, you bring the policy of the issue up, whatever your issue is, to that commander who is closest to where you're at. So if you're a private, you take it to your company commander. And then if you don't like what he's got to say, you can carry it up to the battalion and to the brigade and so on and so forth. And you only get to skip that if the issue is about that lower level commander. But just like you've experienced, that is, people don't always trust the process. And so when I was in Iraq in 2004, and I'm going to tell you a quick war story because I think it's kind of humorous and it kind of illustrates. I was the commander for 1st Battalion, 153rd Infantry, which is headquartered down here in Malvern, and it contains all of the National Guard units in the southwestern part of the state. And we were in Baghdad, and one of the unique things about the National Guard is the diverse background of everybody that makes up the organization. And so I had a soldier who he belonged to one of my units that was down at Arkadelphia, but he actually lived in Colorado Springs, and he had family in Arkadelphia. So he had in his earliest days in the military had gone through the Air Force Academy at Colorado Springs, had received a commission, had made it all the way up to major, and was a fighter pilot. Had decided that the military wasn't for him, and had gotten out and gone to law school. And so he lived out in Colorado Springs, was a lawyer, And because he had family in Arkadelphia, he decided to join the National Guard there in Arkadelphia. He would fly home on those drill weekends and visit with his family, and then participate in our training. Well, through his affiliation with the Air Force, he knew what at that time was the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, which was a 4-star general. They had both started out at the same place at the same time and had known each other. And so we were over there in April or May of 2004, and by that time the real intense ground fighting was already over with. And so we were, trying to figure out how to get the economy back up on its feet, how to get the government up and running so that we could turn all of it back over to the Iraqis and get out of there. And so I had soldiers that would go out and do patrols on on a daily basis to do things other than fight. They would go out and try to figure out how much gas the fuel stations were dispensing and how much food was being sold out of various warehouses. Also that we could give not my boss but my boss's boss a picture of how things were working out there in the neighborhoods. Well, he didn't quite understand the purpose of what we were doing, and so he was a guy with a major's education and background and persona, but he had a staff sergeant's view of the world. And so he, in the course of his communications with his buddy, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, a 4-star general, he sent him an email and said, "Hey, I just can't tell you how screwed up things are out here." Well, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force was a personal friend of my boss's boss, the division commander there in Baghdad. So, of course, the email went from the staff sergeant to the 4-star general, from the 4-star general to the 2-star general, and then it kind of flowed downhill and hit me over the head. And so at that point, I figured out that really the best way to have an open door policy is not for me to wait for them to come into me, but for me to go out and see them. And so what I did was, on about a quarterly basis, I would pull in all the NCOs, all the sergeants, and I would have always a certain number of things that I wanted to talk about. So that was the first one that we talked about, and why that was. I got a copy of the email. I blacked out all the names so that nobody would know who it was, and I gave it out a copy to everybody and said, how many of you think things are screwed up because we're doing this? And then I explained what we were really out trying to do, and you could see the light going on with everybody. And so then it occurred to me, okay, I need a more programmatic way of approaching this instead of just waiting for things to blow up on me. And so about once a quarter, we'd bring everybody in and we'd talk about what was going on. And so as we were getting ready to come back home, everybody was very anxious about, well, where am I going to fit in that aircraft flow so that I can tell my wife when I'm coming back home. And so we told them what the plan was. And then we told them what the plan was for leave and all the other things that we thought would really, be grinding on them at night, so to keeping them from sleeping. And then we'd give them the opportunity to ask questions. And just like you said, the answers to those questions weren't always what they wanted to hear, but they got the answer, and they got it from me instead of from the rumor mill. So you've all played the party game where you get in the great big circle and you whisper to the person on your left a short phrase, and by the time it gets all the way back around to you, it's something unintelligible. Well, organizational communications work exactly the same way. And in the Army, we're hierarchical, so I've got 3 guys that work for me, and they've got 3 guys that work for them all the way down to the last guy. And if you just let communications flow like that, then when that last soldier in that last squad hears it, it ain't what you said. So you've just got to recognize the shortfalls of that type of communication and figure out how to get your message out there to the lowest level.
Kevin Cronin, a great lead singer for REO Speedwagon, said the tails get taller on down the line. And so that's the way that. How many of you enjoyed this tonight? These, I think, are very important. I think honest, private assessment. And maybe we come together again. I don't know if we should do this. I know we should do this at least quarterly. We'll look at our calendar. We were going to spend some time calendar building tonight. Why don't we just build a calendar and then we get back together? We'll build a calendar, send it to you, and you can send us back some response. And I think goal setting comes after self-reflection. I think self-reflection is kind of where we need to be for a little bit, and then we'll set some goals. We don't have to stick to the calendar. We can move at our pace and grow. Yes, sir. Your small group's becoming a big group, by the way. That's also my only argument with that. Zig Ziglar taught me a few things I said in a couple of his courses, and he talks about short-term, intermediate, and long-term goals. And he also talks about we'd sit around, and I'm sure Ken has done this, and we'd just sit around and dream. Forget goals. Let's dream a little bit. And really, that dream became your long-term goal. And it may be a goal that you never hit. But if you have some unbelievably huge goal out there, you'll more likely accomplish more than if you had a small goal and you hit it. So it's okay to dream a little bit. And I think the devil's business is not, he goes past stealing our dreams. He even steals our questions. And we just get dumbed down to living in this gray, drab existence. And I'd like to live life in color, and I'd like to see us be a blessing to other people. God bless you. Let's stand together. Any other quick? We leave anybody out real quick? Didn't they do good? Real good. Some of our new folks here, come on, help us. Come on, help us. Some of us, Cassie's not a new one. She's been here forever, but we let her off the hook for a while to get married. Now, come on, man. Let's get busy working for God. And there's so much talent and ability, education, just stuff.